would be a mediator. But I think we forget sometimes that children think differently, and adolescents think differently. I think we were talking today about in the after classroom, that children don't plan their days as well, like as adults do. So adults tend to bargain, oh, I walk to school today, or I walk to work today, I don't have to go to the gym. But children don't do that. They I walk to school. They don't think I walk to school, so I'm not going to go play at recess or play ball. They just do it. Especially with older children, the parental perceptions don't really have as much influence, I think, on their behavior. Younger children, maybe, parents, I don't feel my neighborhood safe, so I'm not going to let my child walk to school, or I'm not going to let my child play outside in the street or whatever. So I'm going to drive them to school, or I'm going to keep them inside and let them watch movies or whatever all day. But adolescents on the other hand, they have more of an independence. They have more have a way to, make their decisions more independently or more autonomously. So I think that could be a reason. I don't know if anyone else has an idea. But again, also if you want to stress the cross-sectional nature of the BYS, I mean, ideally, I would like to determine the mediation. I would like to see, you want to see if social fragmentation leads to an increased likelihood of perceiving your neighborhood as being unsafe, leading to, physical activity. So you want to see those changes, but this is cross-sectional, so you don't see those changes. You don't see, the children across time becoming less likely to changing their perception of safety. Ideally, I think that's what I would like to do, is to do more across time, more longitudinal studies. Does that make sense?
Did you do any, this is kind of building on Tom's and your question as well, but what about, since Boston in particular has a lot of racial ethnic diversity,
Right.
so within Dorchester or within JP, Jamaica Plains, did you do anything with that or control for race, ethnicity, or just what are your thoughts about that in general? You might have been a little, like you're a little constrained on sample size. You could go one way or the other in terms of multi-level.
I have tried looking at
Mm-hmm.
proportion of black,
Mm-hmm.
proportion of the neighborhood that's black.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes when I include that variable, at the neighborhood level,
Yeah.
the models collapse. And I'm finding that problem with some of my other studies using the BOIS, that when I do
Mm-hmm.
include that variable, the area level variable, the models won't run, they won't converge.
Mm-hmm.
So I think
38 small to deal with.
larger data sets,
Mhm.
with more sample, with more students participating would help. What I didn't try with the BYS is I didn't impute on the exposures. I would like to assume if there was a difference in imputing. I would impute the data and see if there's
On the outcome?
No, not the outcome.
Oh.
The say mediators.
The mediator.
The mediators. Any of the behavioral, not the outcome, the behavioral ones, like mediation. See if my N would be, if there was a greater power in terms of imputing my rate.
Well, I think for those of us who work with surveillance data, I mean, this is, the national YRBS question for physical activity, but we also know that self-reports are very biased and in different directions for different intensities. And I wondered what thoughts you had about ways to deal with some of those self-report biases in doing these kind of analyses, or embedding a subsample with accelerometry, or
a few, so you could test validity.
Kind of multi-method approach.
Right. I think it would be great if I had a subsample bring a self-accelerometer. I would have loved to have given them all accelerometers. We didn't have to, ask that question. But I think it would be great to even do a validity study to see. Well, we couldn't call it validity because accelerometers they're not the gold standard.
Yeah.
There's limitations in that as well. But there are some accelerometers that are better than others. So just use a comparison that way.
I want to thank you for coming, and I did want to reinforce your selection of your tie. It was a good choice.
Oh, thank you.
The question I have
And your shirt, just by the way, Dale,
well,
looks like maize and blue and
as I'm listening to your talk, in general, what is the earliest age groups that are being studied for these questions?
In terms
Most of it seems to be more adolescent and above, but I'm wondering just when do these relationships emerge? I mean,
with so the social environment and behavior.
yeah.
So if I think back to my well, if I were to look at my thesis, I did use my outcome was after transportation to school, and I used the area level factors that were used for social cohesion. I didn't use social fragmentation, but social cohesion and safety. Those are the area level factors. It all depends on of course which exposure, and also I guess the context, what I'm putting it in. So for example, after transportation to school, the younger children, it's more the parents that make that decision. So forget the title of the it's along the conceptual framework that presents that it's the parents that make that decision, and everything else is a mediator or acts as a moderator with the parents' decision whether or not to allow their children to walk or use active modes of transportation to school. So in that case, yes, I think it acts through the parents for the younger kids, but for adolescents, I think because they're becoming more autonomous and independent, that these factors do come into play. I think the thing that struck me most about social fragmentation, it's about because it's been shown to show your mental health, to stress and depression. One pathway I pointed out was social exclusion or isolation that I didn't test. I think if you think back to being a teenager, that could, feeling excluded either at a school level or at the neighborhood level could really, I think it impacts you a lot more than I think that's the age really when it starts to really hit you that that could have an effect on you, that you're feeling socially isolated, that could really have an impact on your mental health or even your subsequent physical activity or your other health behaviors.
So I think we have time for one more, sort of quick. Rebecca?
Just a quick, very nice presentation. I know you said you were interested in natural experiments. To kind of get at Wayne's question as well, are you aware of any neighborhoods that potentially there's low safety but high cohesion, or vice versa, to where you could see, because I know most of the literature shows, low cohesion, high neighborhood violence, or they're very collinear, but are there any maybe ethnic enclaves or anywhere to where you can see that, yes, there is a lot of violence, but, when the gangbangers come out on the street, the neighbors warn their kids to go inside or something?
I think maybe certain parts of Boston in particular. Do you mind if I talk about a study that I'm working on right now?
Sure, we have like another minute. But
okay, it was the
entice
BYS,
us.
and I'm looking at, and I find the results really interesting. So the BYS, I'm looking at income inequality within the neighborhood. So I assigned, which is a form of income inequality, the Gini coefficient, which 1 very equal economically, and 0 means that. 1 very unequal, 0 very equal. And the high income inequality neighborhoods, those students living in those neighborhoods are more likely to experience or to commit acts of aggression or violence, but only among non-black boys. But in neighborhoods, but black boys, they're significantly least likely to commit. And these are in high income unequal neighborhoods. So I started thinking about what's going on. Ichiro said, why don't you throw in percentage being black in the neighborhood in the model and see what happens. The models collapsed. So we started thinking of other ways to what are other possibilities, and, either that it's that there's effect modification going on by proportion of blacks. So those with high proportions of blacks in the neighborhood, the social this income inequality leads to high social cohesiveness because of the history of oppression that they've experienced. This increased inequality leads to this greater solidarity. which we see usually, which the theory goes, it goes the other way around, that high income inequality leads to decreased social cohesion.
Mhm.
So that could be one reason. There've been I've heard of some studies. I'm trying to find the source. I don't know if you know of any, like in terms of when in times of crisis, the person most likely, the population most likely to help each other are the black males. Have you heard of any study like that?
I am not.
So, but that's one study that I've heard of. So,
Okay, thank you.
Great, well, we probably should wrap up, so I want to thank everybody for coming and
Thank
thank
you.
you for a great talk.